Thanks to Displate for sponsoring this video. The Witcher is a fantasy universe full of monsters and wild beasts that terrorise the inhabitants of the Witcher world. Witchers, who have undergone extensive training and conditioning, slay these monsters, being monster hunters for hire. However, it's not just monsters that plague the world of The Witcher. The world is full of mystery and deceit, with answers not often being presented to us. This leads to speculation as to what could have happened in the past, the present, and the future. An iceberg, also known as an iceberg chart, displays theories and facts detailing around a specific context. With the further down the iceberg the points are placed, the more mysterious the theory often becomes. There was actually no iceberg of The Witcher on the internet that I could find, so I decided that we should make one for ourselves. The Witcher universe has a lot of content, with novels being written by Andrzej Sapkowski, games made by CD Projekt Red, and an ongoing TV series on Netflix. This video will be discussing theories and facts surrounding all of these materials, and with each theory we go through, I'll have icons at the start of the theory highlighting which parts of the lore are relevant to the theory, be it the books, the game, or the television series. I'll also be displaying a health bar, which represents how likely I think a theory is to be true, with a full health bar meaning that the theory is almost certain to be fact, while an empty bar means that I think the theory is close to impossible. If there are any major spoilers for a particular franchise being mentioned with a theory, I will also show a warning along with a timestamp that you'll be able to skip to the next theory without being spoiled. But firstly, it's important for us to consider the relevancy that the novels, the books, and the games have with each other. All Witcher works are based on the original short stories and novels written by Andrzej Sapkowski. CD Projekt Red then obtained the rights to make the Witcher games, and they're placed around 5 years after the events of the books. Sapkowski does not consider these events as canon, but the games remain as true to the novels as they can be, while also having their own creative freedom. The Netflix series is quite a loose adaptation of the books, currently being around the books of The Last Witch and The Season of Storms, so this adaptation can be less relied on than the games, but not always. For example, in the Witcher games, as the games progress, Geralt is depicted more often than not with a beard, while in the Netflix series, Geralt doesn't actually have a beard. This is because in the books, Geralt actually preferred to go clean shaven. As we can find at the end of the Time of Contempt, he states that his beard was really itchy and he didn't like it. In contrast, Foltest, who is depicted in both the Netflix series and the games, was described in the books as a slim, too pretty face with a noble profile, being under the age of 40. For me, he looks younger and prettier in the video games, even though they are based in a time after the period of the Netflix show. So both adaptations can have their flaws, but we can still take both of these works as lenses into how the Witcher series could be understood, as of course they've studied the world a whole lot more than me. It's also worth mentioning there's a short-lived Polish TV series and movie of The Witcher, which is known as The Hexer. In the parts that I've watched, I found at times it was actually a truer adaptation of the Netflix series, but at other times it was a bit insane, like when Geralt could go invisible. Yeah. There's also other Witcher content such as comics that I don't really touch during this video. So apologies for quite the long introduction, but before we start, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. Toss a coin to your sponsor, oh viewer of Natties, oh viewer of Natties, oh whoa. What's this? Ooh, look at this. It's a charmed jar with a djinn inside who will fulfill all my 3 wishes. My wishes are as follows. Firstly, may my abode's interiors be adorned with beautiful art. Secondly, I would like this beauty to last generations and be the talk of the troubadours. Thirdly, may the decorations also be easily substituted, as I'm a man of varying tastes of art. Halt! I am no djinn, therefore I will not be fulfilling your wishes. However, I know of someone who can fulfill these for you at a very affordable price. Oh? Displate are a one-of-a-kind poster that conveys the beautiful artwork on sturdy posters that are durable to withstand a lifetime of intense staring and harness the magic of magnets. They are very quick to install, and this dashing man right now can install it in under 1 minute. Well, except for of course the first step, which if required, all you need to do is clean the wall with a cleaning wipe and let it dry out completely, which is around 10 minutes. We stick the protective leaf onto the wall and tear away the back paper slowly and press around to remove the air bubbles. Then we press the magnet onto the protective leaf for 5 seconds and we hang our displate. Look at how beautiful this is! As these are using magnets, we can easily swap out our posters and easily put any poster of our desire in its place. You've heard of in-game advertisements, but have you heard of in-advertisement games? Try and guess which area in Witcher 3 this concept art is for. Did you get it? It is of course the Nilfgaardian garrison. With a huge collection of art available on Displate, with official Witcher, Cyberpunk, Star Wars, as well as over 40,000 artists, there is so much great art available on Displate.
But posters are built on papers, and we dryads would never condone the harming of trees.
Well, good news for you, my lovely friend. Displate is made from metal, so no trees are harmed. In fact, for every Displate you purchase, Displate plants a sapling, with over 14 million trees being planted in Africa to revitalise dying soils and help the starving secure a source of food. So what are you waiting for? Purchase a Displate today using the discounted link in the description to help support the environment, the channel, and most importantly, your bare walls. Now, it's time for us to drink our elixirs and explore the vast Witcher Iceberg. Let's start off our adventures with the Harpies, in the sky layer of the iceberg. Many Roches. Roche is the name of Geralt's horse, but sorry if this is going to come as a shock to you. Throughout Geralt's journey, he actually had many different horses, and all of them were named Roche. In the Baptism of Fire, at one point, Geralt states,
I look forward to the opportunity I have to get rid of this animal. May it die. I'd even exchange it for an ass.
It may seem, based upon this, that Geralt seemingly has no deep connection with his horses, which potentially could be why he named them all Roche, with Roche commonly being thought of as a cockroach. One theory, explained by YouTuber Witcher George, theorises that Geralt names all of his horses Roche because he wants to remove attachment between himself and his horses, as he loses so many of them and he doesn't want to become emotionally tied to them. In the Time of Contempt, Dandelion, whose Polish name is Jaskier, which you may know from the Netflix series, asks Geralt if he has ever not named a horse called Roche, with Geralt saying after a moment's thought that he hasn't. So on the surface, this lack of emotion could seem like a valid theory, but I'm pretty sure that this theory does not hold true. The name Roche actually refers to a less known European freshwater fish. The original name Plotka is a diminutive of Ploch. A diminutive is a word that has been modified to convey a slightly different meaning to its root, and they're often used to convey a term of endearment, especially in Polish. So a more accurate translation would have been Rochi, but this still seems to have lost most of its love with the translation. Interestingly, Plotka's meaning of fish is actually a female-gendered word, which could explain why all of Geralt's horses are mares. But there's actually another meaning for Plotka, figuratively meaning small fry, or an unimportant member of an organisation, which is most likely criminal, and a horse could be seen as unimportant. In the Polish version of The Witcher 3, broken flowers can compliment Geralt for excellent riding skills, from someone whose horse is a small fry. This small fry meaning actually makes the name gender neutral, so the name may not be the reason as to why Geralt only chooses mares. Mares are often less aggressive than stallions, so they are often easier to handle, and this could have been another factor for Geralt's preference of female horses. Either way, Geralt definitely has care for his many Roche horses, with M. David Bulmer theorising that Geralt actually wants to give off the illusion that he doesn't care about his horse, while he deeply does. In the Season of Storms, Geralt leaves Roche in the stables of the port city of Karak, and he leaves the groom with instructions to ensure Roche's proper care, paying 2 days in advance. Geralt seems quite soft-hearted towards his horses. Perhaps there was an original horse named Roche that Geralt held very dear and wants a part of it to live in through his other horses. Or perhaps he just wants to take care of all of his horses, but to the extent of caring that Geralt can actually be. Ultimately though, there's no confirmed reason as to why Geralt has named all of his horses Roche, but I prefer the theory of a caring Geralt as opposed to a careless one, which could be seen as out of character. The Last Wish. The following theory discussion contains spoilers for the plot of the novel The Last Wish, and episode 5 of the first season of the Netflix Witcher. In the novel The Last Wish, Geralt and Yennefer battle an all-powerful djinn. The djinn powers were said to have been harnessed by the powerful mage Geoffrey Monk, who would keep them in bottles and make use of them when need arose. You'd have 3 wishes from each genie, and then it would be free and escape into its own dimension. Geralt and Dandelion came across a bottle, with Dandelion believing that he has command of the 3 wishes. But the djinn nearly kills Dandelion, with Geralt later realising that he is the controller of the wishes. Geralt's first wish was spoken in a language that he didn't understand, and the priest Crep roughly translated it to, "Get out of here and go do yourself." This is changed in the Netflix show version to wish Dandelion to have some peace and quiet, giving reason as to why the djinn would attack Dandelion. But if we have a think about what the first command in the book was, and what the djinn would have to go and do, you can understand why it seems to have been a bit mad. The second wish that Geralt gave was for a guard to burst, which the guard does, and this helps Geralt understand that he himself is in control of the wishes. The third and last wish that Geralt gave was in order to save Yennefer from the djinn. However, we as the audience are not aware of what the wish was. In the Netflix show, Yennefer is also not aware of what the wish is, but in the books, she actually does hear what the wish was. "The wish of yours. I heard what you wished for. I was astounded. Simply astounded. I'd have expected anything. But to... What made you do it, Geralt? Why? Why me? I don't know whether such a wish could ever be fulfilled. I don't know whether there's such a force in nature that could fulfill such a wish. But if there is, then you've condemned yourself to me." But when I read this, I was instantly curious as to what this wish could be. Stack Exchange user Randall Thor has gone through a couple of theories, so let's draw some inspiration from them. One theory is that the wish was for Geralt and Yennefer to have a baby together. This could be because as a sorceress, Yennefer cannot actually have a child, but deeply yearns for one, and by Geralt making this wish, the djinn wouldn't be able to kill Yennefer, at least for the time being. But in an interview, Sapkowski straight out denied that this was the wish, so we can cross this off our list. Another popular theory was that the wish was for Yennefer to fall in love with Geralt, but the djinn could have granted this and then killed Yennefer afterwards, so this might not have theoretically saved her. Randall Thor then states that the effect of the wish both protected them from the djinn and binded their fates together, as the priest Crep in the books also later concludes. Arkady suggests a more unorthodox theory. Geralt's genie link actually isn't with Yennefer, but rather is with Dandelion. In The Witcher 3, when you finally lift the link between Geralt and Yennefer, they both feel as if nothing has changed. Yennefer in the game was adamant that the wish did bind their fates together, but perhaps the actual wish somehow contorted both of their thoughts on the wish itself. Crep states that genies are spiteful and deceitful beings. They do everything they possibly can to make it impossible for you to express your wish, and then they fulfill them in such a way which is hard to control and foresee, so you have to be very careful in what you say. This can be seen in the Netflix adaptation of The Witcher, where one of Geralt's wishes was to have some peace and quiet, but the djinn granted this by wounding Dandelion instead, so he was unable to speak. In The Sword of Destiny, it's not Yennefer that Geralt keeps on randomly running into around the land, but Dandelion. Often throughout the novels, when Geralt and Dandelion are in trouble, the other is there or comes to help them, with Yennefer seemingly off elsewhere. Even in the Witcher games, it's Dandelion that Geralt runs into, and it's Dandelion who narrates the events of the game, and it's Dandelion who is responsible for spreading the fame and popularity of Geralt. One of the main quests in Witcher 3, A Poet Under Pressure, you have to save Dandelion. They seem to stumble into each other no matter the story, no matter the game, so it's the two of them who are destined for each other, right? Vitor Assis explains that destiny is the end. Yennefer's end would have been by the hand of the Djinn if not for Geralt's last wish. So potentially Geralt established that his destiny, his end, would be at the same moment alongside Yen. As the Djinn could not harm his wish holder, technically he would not be able to fulfill Geralt's wish if he killed Yennefer, which means that Geralt protected Yennefer from the Djinn, but if possible, also condemned his fate to Yen's. While it hasn't been confirmed exactly what the last wish was, it's pretty much certain that it has to do with the fate of Geralt tied to Yennefer. In The Blood of Elves, Philippa Eilhart says that Geralt's destiny is in Yennefer's hands, and that he placed it in her hands himself. Perhaps Dandelion was also somehow intertwined in this destiny, but I think a lot of this was due to his friendship and passion for good stories, as opposed to being condemned to Geralt by the last wish. Well, that brings an end to the sky segment of the iceberg, but when something ends, something also begins, and in this case, it's the surface layer. Ciri has been in the Cyberpunk universe. Ciri possesses the power to jump through time and space, and does so during the books as well as the games. In Witcher 3, during a conversation with Geralt, Ciri says that the elf Avalak hid her from the Wild Hunt for half a year, in a place where people had metal on their heads, waged war from a distance, and using things similar to megascopes. There were no longer any horses, and everyone had their own flying ship instead. Many people thought that this was a loose connection to Cyberpunk, and Ciri was going to be in the Cyberpunk world, at least in the form of an Easter egg. The metal in their heads could refer to cyberware that is often grafted to the human body. The waged war from a distance could simply refer to guns. A megascope in the Witcher world was a device to teleport and communicate over long distances, so this could refer to things such as the fast travel system or other more concrete devices such as television. And the flying ships that Ciri suggested could easily refer to the numerous flying cars that can be found in the world of Cyberpunk. So could the world that Ciri visited have been Cyberpunk? If so, there should be evidence in Cyberpunk that Ciri was there, right? In Cyberpunk, you have to choose between 3 different life paths for the protagonist V: Corpo, Nomad, or Street Kid. If the player chooses the Corpo path, early in their playthrough they can come across a desk that contains a retro gaming magazine, which displays the cover of Witcher 3, with Ciri being on that cover. So this is a reference to the Witcher series. But if we think about it in reference to the Cyberpunk universe, it thinks that, like our reality, the Witcher saga is represented by games. However, as we previously mentioned, Ciri has the ability to jump through both time and space, so would it not be possible for her to make it into a universe where they believe her just to be a game? There's definitely still room for CD Projekt Red if they feel like adventuring down this path, but I personally think this is more of just fans wanting this to happen, and Ciri could have been mentioning any type of vague futuristic world that she has visited. Dandelion invented Gwent. Gwent is a well-known card game that was firstly introduced to players in Witcher 3, and later made as a standalone card game. Senchu theorises that Dandelion is actually the inventor of Gwent, with it being another one of his ideas of business. The Witcher 3 is narrated by Dandelion,
with my dear friend Geralt of Rivia seeking his lover of yore, the sorceress Yennefer.
even though the narrator has a much deeper and rougher voice than the Dandelion in the game. This is most likely because it's him as an old man recounting the story, which is similar to the books. Internet is Hard notes that the original Polish version of The Witcher 3 actually has the same voice, both being the narrator and Dandelion in the game, so he is definitely the same person. Another thing we see in Witcher 3 is that there's lots and lots of Gwent. Are you in the middle of a time-pressing quest to save a young child? How about a game of Gwent first? On the hunt to find Ciri? Maybe it will be quicker if we play a game of Gwent. Maybe all of these events were added into Dandelion's retelling of the story in order to further advertise his game. All of the characters in the Gwent deck include characters that Geralt has interacted with, which Dandelion would have been aware of and written it in his books, or maybe his card game. Although there is a book in The Witcher 3 called Gwent, A History, and it states that Gwent can be found most frequently among the dwarves, who were the game's inventors and most passionate devotees. In the Baptism of Fire, the dwarves can be found playing an addictive card game, which in the Polish version is called Gwin, and Gwent in Polish is also called Win. But the game in the Baptism of Fire is called Barrel in the English version of the books, and if we translate Vin, it would mean something like screwed. The rules of this barrel are also mentioned in the book, and it's similar to a game such as Bridge, in which you have to exchange information about your hands in order to detect tricks. So this version of Gwent in the games is different from the version in the books. An additional event in the books is Dandelion becoming hooked onto this card game. So perchance he was inspired to create his own card game? But I'm not sure how this would explain the credit of the Gwent game going to the dwarves. As if Dandelion created Gwent, he would definitely want to have credit for it. 1358. A Tomb Entombed is a side quest in Witcher 3 that can often be difficult to find. Hidden behind a weak wall in the Novigrad sewers, you'll find Professor Vermont Jones struggling to open a steel sarcophagus in a desperate attempt to obtain a manuscript that's rumoured to be inside. But upon opening the lid, it's revealed that there's a vampire sleeping inside.
Is it 1358 yet?
No.
Then fuck off.
But why would this vampire mention the year 1358? The unseen elder in the Blood and Wine mentions that the gate between Geralt's world and the vampire world will open in 100 years. This is related to the conjunction of the spheres, which was the collision of many different realms, resulting in many monsters and creatures filling the world as we know it. This happened around 1,500 years before the novels. So could this happen again in 1358? Or even be predicted for that matter? If this was the case, then perhaps this vampire was just sleeping until the day that he would be able to return to his own world. If we discuss to Regis about this conversation with the unseen elder, he doesn't seem aware of the 1358 date, or that the vampires would be able to return home. Regis is a knowledgeable and well-informed vampire, so if he is not aware of these events, why would a random vampire in Novigrad be aware of this? The bestiary entry for High Vampire has this Novigrad vampire as the picture, and he also appears in a Witcher 3 trailer, so perhaps he is actually more important than first seems. But with this importance only leading towards an easily missable location, this doesn't seem that likely. Dade Leviathan theorises that 1358 could actually be an Easter egg. The real city of Novigrad is located in western Croatia, in the Istria county. The Republic of Ragusa, which is located in the far south of Croatia, originated through independence from Venice, with the Treaty of Zadar in 1358. So this could be a quite loose connection to Croatian history. However, I think both of these theories are quite unlikely. Toussaint is doomed. Toussaint is a city that is most famous for its wines. This is helped by the region having very rich volcanic soil. A Remon moon serpent suggests that Toussaint's days are numbered, stating that volcanic soil is actually across the entire region, which suggests that it must have been quite a large volcanic eruption to cause this. Mount Gorgon is the highest peak in the Amel range, with Toussaint acting as a passage through the mountain between the northern kingdoms and the Nilfgaardian Empire. The term Gorgon comes from the ancient Greek word gorgus, meaning grim or dreadful. This dreadful mountain we could relate to mountains like St. Helens, with maybe the grim and dreadful reality being this mountain will erupt, destroying Toussaint and revitalising the soil. A quick Easter egg interruption here, you actually cannot access the peak of Mount Gorgon, but if you can access it through using mods on PC, there is actually a painting easel holding up a picture of the development team. If we look at the architecture of the villas in Toussaint, they seem to be very Italian. Vindicare 605 supposes that Toussaint was actually just a mirror of our world's Italy. Italy also has famous volcanoes, with Mount Vesuvius erupting in 79 AD, destroying the Roman city of Pompeii. So could Toussaint also end up mirroring this too? The destruction of Toussaint could well be a possibility. Now before we fully move on, let's delve into another Toussaint theory further down the iceberg. The Toussaint is a vampire-controlled colony. Not only is Toussaint a thriving place for wine, it seems to have quite a fairy tale kingdom aurora around it. In The Lady of the Lake, Geralt's party rests at Toussaint, and all seem to find some sort of love. Some people, such as Niall Mull 97, speculate this is because Toussaint is a vampire-controlled colony, essentially being a blood bank, which is why there seems to be quite a large population of vampires around the city as seen in the Witcher games. It's said that when the conjunction of the spheres first occurred, the gates from the vampire universe opened where Toussaint is today. So this would have been the first area where vampires were seen in the Witcher world, so it makes sense that they would make a sort of a base here. the wine could also be symbolism for the blood of the humans that the vampires taste. Note that Witcher 3 had a final expansion called Blood and Wine, which focused on Toussaint and vampires. Simon Shepard countered this theory though, and states that the narrative doesn't really fit the Witcher universe, and more so just fits an ideal fantasy of intense vampire power. In the canon Witcher universe, and to an extent the games, let's ignore Gaunter, there isn't really an individually insanely powerful person in the story, and an underlying vampire control of humans would seemingly go against this. I'd agree with this to the extent of Sapkowski's universe, but for the games, I think this theory could be a bit more likely if they steer the ship further away from canon material. Now, let's poise ourselves for the body of the iceberg. The world is on a verge of scientific revolution. Throughout the journey that we take in the Witcher world, we occasionally see details that could hint that the medieval world is on the verge of an industrial and scientific revolution. In the Time of Contempt, Ciri is being shown around Gore's Velen by Fabio, who is a young clerk at the Giancardi Bank. During this time, she gets an image of his future, with him becoming a famous explorer, discovering a new continent to the west. Key Squirrel Tree believes that this exploration could lead to great technological advancement, as a new continent could lead to more resources, which leads to a more competitive market, and potentially the introduction of new technology. But this really isn't that strong enough evidence to say that a scientific revolution will occur. In the Season of Storm, Geralt examines quite an advanced mechanism that creates barrels using pressure, and it seems quite advanced for a dark medieval fantasy setting. In the Tower of the Swallows, archaeologists discovered some of Dandelion's manuscripts, with the time of these letters being dated as the Dark Ages. A Dark Age implies a time when a civilization undergoes a decline of some sort. As we are in the lens of the Dark Age, then at the end of this age there must be a vast improvement of some sort. Could this improvement be a result of a scientific or industrial revolution? Alternative accounts furthers the idea that the Witcher world is nearing a scientific revolution. In The Lady of the Lake, Ciri teleports to her world briefly and travels back to the Witcher world, but not before a flea jumps onto her and travels on the Catriona, eventually spiralling out of control in the Northern Kingdom as the Catriona Plague. This is a disease that is extremely similar to the bubonic plague, which was also known as the Black Death. Slight spoilers for The Witcher 3, but if Keira Metz is invited to Kaer Morhen, she ends up finding a cure to the Catriona Plague. In our world, the most popular theory of how the Black Plague ended was through the use of quarantines, with the uninfected staying in their homes and only leaving when necessary. Nowadays, antibiotics are the most effective treatment for the bubonic plague, but these were only discovered in the middle of the 20th century. Even though Keira would have used magic, the medicinal science level in the Witcher world is far greater in comparison to what our world's medieval age had. Leon Oppenhauser, a professor at the Oxenfurt Academy, even invented a functioning perpetual motion device during the events of the Lady of the Lake, only for it to have been broken by a shockwave caused by destruction of a castle. Ultimately though, I think that the Witcher world doesn't stick to the story of medieval fantasy, with more modern methods of concepts being brought in when it's felt fitting. For example, there are fireworks and bombs in the Witcher world, but there's no evidence of cannons or guns. But this could also just mean that the world is in the early use of gunpowder, with civilizations in our world also using cannons and guns way after fireworks and bombs were first invented. In saying this though, Mage Grandmaster Ortolan invented many things, one of them being an arbalest that shot lead balls, effectively being a Gatling gun. This was tested in battle, but reported as horrible to use, so it wasn't used later on in the Witcher world. I agree that the Witcher world is on the verge of a scientific revolution, but like worlds such as Skyrim, I think that the technology in the Witcher world is being held back by the use of magic. Zesrid supposes that any of the scientific discoveries, if we take the inventor Ortolan for example, is done by a mage. The regular people of the Witcher world do not trust magic, with some even fearing its use. So a lot of these inventions and ideas will simply be rejected by the notion that it was suggested by a mage. The use of magic and mages may have to be seized in order for technology to be advanced dramatically in The Witcher. Maybe this will have to wait until after the catastrophic events of the White Frost, speculated to happen thousands of years after the story's current timeline. The Doppler's payment. The following theory contains spoilers for Season 1, Episode 5 and 6 of the Netflix Witcher series. The Dopplers are a shapeshifter who can take form of anyone they have contact with them also containing that person's memory and knowledge. In Bottled Appetites, a Doppler disguises itself as Mousak in order to obtain Ciri. Kahir, a knight from the Nilfgaardian Empire, says that he is paying him but not with silver coins. So what could the Doppler's payment be? When the Doppler is impersonating Mousak, he would repeatedly touch Ciri's hair, something that Mousak usually did not do. The Riccius Morty theorises that the Doppler was actually promised some of Ciri's hair, so that the Doppler could use it as part of his body collection that is shown at the start of the episode. It's also worth mentioning that the Dopplers in the novels are exceptionally kind and gentle beings, but this one is introduced as an evil creature, specifically stated as being different. This Doppler also says that they specifically liked children, so potentially this Doppler actually wants to be Ciri. Or as Gilmore Sprout suggests, the Doppler was just acting like a predator and seemingly playing with his food, making us fearful for Ciri in the hands of this evil Mousak. Continuing along with the Netflix theme, another theory presented to us is that Dandelion is immortal. Season 1 of The Witcher jumps between 20 years, with individuals such as Geralt and Yennefer aging much slower than normal humans. But Dandelion also looks exactly the same in these two different time periods. When he first met Geralt, he should have been around 18 years old. But by the end of Season 1, he should have been in his 40s, and it doesn't look like he's aged even a day. Even in The Witcher 3, he's meant to be in his 50s, but I have to say he looks quite young for a 50-year-old. Tumbleweed223 thinks that Dandelion actually drank a potion that slowed his aging process or made him completely immortal, but there's no real evidence in the books or the games that there's a potion like this. Vandy and Velen suggest that like the games and the novels, the Netflix series could actually be told through the lens of Dandelion, which of course, him humbly showing that he's not aging one bit. Conclusively though, the leading producer, Lauren Hisrich, responded to these fans' questions, stating that it actually was a mistake, and that he would have aged a lot in this season, but he must have just had great genes. Still, we'd assume that Season 2 would have some sort of explanation, so the above theories could still be possible. Next off, we're increasing the pressure and mystery as we head to the bottom of the iceberg. Witches are monsters. The witches are taken in when they are young, trained, and subjected to processes such as the trial of the grasses, which would then turn them into a witcher. Frisky Dingo 1 suggests that the witches essentially became monsters themselves. In The Blood of Elves, a manuscript can be found written by Carla Damasia Kress, which depicts that the children were given elixirs, along with mutagenic mushrooms, herbs, and other plant stimulants in order to change their reflexes and abilities, such as being able to see in the dark. Carla concludes that the eyes of the newly born witcher had the eyes of the viper. Could these witches actually be monsters themselves? The Witcher game details that mutagens produce a witcher, with these mutagens being obtainable by slaying unique monsters. So it takes ingredients of monsters to create a witcher. So maybe, like fighting fire with fire, you need to fight monsters with monsters. The original witches were first created to combat monsters, and were mutated through the invention created by a group of mages. But it's unclear what they mutated the witches into, so they could potentially be monsters, and I think that in some form, this is pretty much true. Cutthroat Witcher is Vesemir's master. Now this is a bit of a niche theory, but we have to put in a theory surrounding the standalone game of Gwent. Vesemir is one of the oldest and most experienced witches that we are exposed to, and is a father figure and mentor to Geralt. In The Witcher 3, Geralt mentions a witcher from the School of the Wolf called Barman. Barman was a mentor to Vesemir, and could have been the founder or one of the first members of the School of the Wolf, which Vesemir and Geralt were later part of. In Gwent, there's a journey system, which reveals an unfolding story as you progress and play the game. In the Azul's journey, there's a witcher known as Cutthroat. Smeeky55 supposes that this witcher nicknamed Cutthroat could have indeed been Barman. Cutthroat seems quite bitter with others and the world, and Smeeky states that these characteristics make him more likely to be a School of the Wolf witcher, and therefore could be Barman. But there's one key element which could disprove this theory. In the journal, Cutthroat initially uses a crossbow to defeat a monster, which according to The Witcher 3 are only known to be used by the Cat School and Bear School. So I think that Cutthroat is more likely to be part of the School of the Bear due to their lonesome traits, as opposed to the School of the Cat's often enhanced emotions. So because of this, I don't think that Cutthroat is actually Vesemir's master. that the Cockatrice Inn is run by vampires. The following theory contains spoilers for the Witcher 3 quest The Beast of Toussaint and one of the short stories in The Last Wish. The Cockatrice Inn is an inn found in Toussaint in the Blood and Wine expansion of Witcher 3. When being in this inn, a strange woman appears. Milton, the Baron from Toussaint, claims that she is the innkeeper's daughter.
Who was that? Woman who just left. Didn't see her before. Didn't notice her walk in either.
Doubtless Linnis, the innkeep's daughter.
However, she actually turns out to be a Bruxa, which is a very powerful type of vampire. So if she is actually the innkeeper's daughter, could the inn be actually run by vampires? YouTuber Exlatalis has done a theory video upon this exact conspiracy, so I suggest you watch their videos for some suggested theories that I won't be covering in this video. Exlatalis concludes that the Bruxa Linnis has put a spell on the innkeeper to say that Linnis was actually his daughter. This is similar to a short story in The Last Wish, where a Bruxa, Verena, was planning on enslaving the cursed mind of Velen, so that she could use him as her protector. However, in this story, Geralt managed to stop Verena from controlling Velen's mind, but perhaps with Linnis, she had already succeeded with enslaving the innkeeper's mind. FKY-Man proposed a theory that the Bruxa is actually just in a case of mistaken identity, as when Geralt asks Milton who the lady is, Milton doesn't actually get to see her, but just guesses by Geralt's vague description that it was the innkeeper's daughter. Maybe there is an innkeeper's daughter somewhere, along with this Bruxa who's been mistaken as the innkeeper's daughter. On the notice board located at the Cockatrice Inn, a note can be seen titled Dear Customers, which is a note signed by Linka, the innkeep's daughter, warning travellers to be careful and bypass a forest where monsters are present. But the notice on this board says the daughter's name is Linka and not Linnis. This is just a mistranslation though, as if we check the original Polish version of the game, both of these times the daughter is referred to as Linka, so it seems like the notice board was mistranslated from the Polish name, which could have been likely as they also misspelt the word safe. But this notice board shows that there's evidence of a more caring innkeep's daughter, something which a Bruxa might not be capable of. Oriana is another Bruxa that ran an orphanage in Toussaint, which seems to be quite a caring endeavour, until you realise that she had sinister motives of feeding off the children of the orphanage. So let's take another look at this note on the notice board and arm ourselves with the assumption that the person writing this has a sinister motive. It seems to have a caring message of people avoiding the forest to not be killed by a monster. But the reasoning in this note, rather than keeping people alive, is that the inn can keep its atmosphere, meaning that they want as many people at the inn as possible. Could this potentially be so that the Bruxa could also feed off more occupants? The lack of mentioning of the innkeeper's daughter leads me to believe that Exlatalis' theory is more likely, and there is in fact no real innkeeper's daughter. Now let's find out what's finally hidden in the depths of this iceberg. The Lady in the Wood is Freya. The following theory contains spoilers for Witcher 3 quest, Ladies of the Wood, and the Whispering Hillock. Now I've saved an explanation from an earlier level of the iceberg pointers till now, in order to be able to keep our minds fresh on this knowledge. In the Witcher 3 game, there are 3 crones, also known as Ladies of the Wood, that live in a cabin in the swamps of Velen. They are called Brewis, Weavis, and Wispus, and upon reading the book She Who Knows, it suggests that these were all sisters. Originally, the mother, a Lady of the Wood, was the ruler of Velen, but delved into madness. The daughters then took it upon themselves to save the land and imprisoned their mother, and trapped her as a spirit in the roots of the Whispering Hillock. However, this book may not be entirely truthful, as many of the locals look up to the crones, and seeing as it was a long time since the spirit was condemned to a tree, the book could just have been folklore, or to a degree, not truthful at all. Odysseus speculates that the mother of the crones came to Velen from Skellige. If you wander around Skellige, you'll hear people say,
"We serve her who is virgin, mother and crone."
In regards to Freya, their goddess of fertility, love and beauty, the mother of the crones could have created her 3 daughters rather than conceive them, so could have been a virgin and a mother at the time, and as well as the daughters being crones, could have also been a crone herself. Freya is Old Norse for the lady, so this could be similar to both the lady in the wood in Velen and the lady in Skellige. In the Freya chapter of Concept of the Goddess, written by Stephen Grundy, there is speculation that the name Freya was originally personal to an actual figure, but then later became common usage and part of mythology. so an actual lady known as Freya could have left Skellige and travelled to Velen. However, I think that the timelines are much too short for this adaptation from a figure to a deity to have much truth to it. Shrek is a Witcher. Now for the most important theory of all, that the Shrek universe is actually a Witcher universe of sorts. In Shrek, Lord Farquaad attempts to rid his kingdom of fairy tale characters. Now let's think of them as monsters. And Lord Farquaad also offers a bounty for their removal. Shrek himself wants the fairy tale creatures out of his own lands. Shrek, who is an outcast, along later with Fiona, finds an unlikely source of love through a magic curse. Does this sound familiar? Also, the story is currently butted in by Dandelion. Donkey. Perhaps Shrek is just a more comedic and light-hearted retelling of the Witcher universe. I can't see any problems with this theory. It has to be 100% true. Cats are monsters. Throughout the Witcher books, we see cats constantly being scared of Geralt. For example, in The Sword of Destiny, Geralt sees a cat at the stables, where it freezes, glaring at him angrily and hissing at him, with Geralt joking that he doesn't like cats either. Now you may know that there is one cat in The Witcher 3 that is quite notorious for not feeling threatened by Geralt, and that cat is Nibbles. This cat was actually introduced originally in order to hide animation issues within a cutscene, and Nibbles has reappeared multiple times after, but reappeared in the context of an Easter egg. So this cat not despising Geralt isn't something we really need to take into notice from a lore perspective. But why would cats always seemingly hate Geralt, even when they just meet him? Swansang suggests that cats are monsters, which is why they hate Geralt. Any creature with magic can sense a Witcher and know what they do, so potentially the cats know that Geralt destroys monsters, which means that Geralt destroys them. In The Witcher 3, on the Midcop's notice board in Velen, there's a note by Mindy telling people not to eat cats. After she brewed a broth from a cat, the next day she twisted her ankle in a field. She's adamant that cats are soaked in foul magic and seek revenge from beyond the grave. In The Blood of Elves, cats are the only creatures known to absorb magical energy, but no one knows why they do it. Cats have also never been mentioned in the books or seen in the game to have any silver on them, as magical beasts cannot bear any silver. So this theory is definitely possible, as there are quite a few unanswered questions around cats. But Geralt doesn't suspect cats of being monsters, or at least a monster of sinister intent, so it's purely speculation for now. So that brings us to the end of the Witcher Iceberg. I hope you enjoyed the ride of mystery and knowledge as much as I did. If you are craving some more Witcher lore, I'd suggest YouTubers such as Witcher George and Exlatalis, who mainly do videos surrounding Witcher 3. And a big thank you to you for making it all the way through this video. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, or what other franchises I should cover, either in an Iceberg format or just a video essay. Thanks again to Displate for sponsoring this video. Please check them out if you want to support both myself and them. Hope to see you guys again in the later videos. Thanks again for watching.